All right. Welcome everyone to the Counterrevolution podcast. Today, I'm excited to have this conversation with Miss Rhonda Thomas. She is, I could be wrong, she's going to correct me, but she's the CEO and president.
hmm
Or just, okay, CEO and president of truthineducation.org. Rhonda Thomas, welcome.
Thank you, John, so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So, Rhonda, can to begin with, I'm sure there's a lot of people who may not know you, who
hmm
might want to know what you're doing. Can you share a little bit about yourself and kind of why, what truth in education is, and why people need to know about it?
Yes, I would love to. Um, so, John, I mentored young women, and through doing that, I began to hear about the sex ed in our schools. This has been several years ago, and the books, the pornography in our schools. So that just really concerned me. So I began to do research into that, and then God just pulled me into this this battle, really. And it is a battle. It's a spiritual battle. So I began to do a lot of research and began talking about it and trying to make people aware. And then COVID hit. And as you know, everything, the veil was just ripped off. And we began to see a lot of things taking place in our schools. And God was revealing a lot of darkness. And through that, we have had an opportunity really to work with parents and heard a lot of their stories. And they're tough stories, and those stories are still going on, and they're actually not getting better. So we are just out there doing our research, speaking on all the ideologies in the schools, working with legislators and educating them, and really working with them on bills that we hope will be family friendly and, of course, help us with everything that's going on in our schools. So that's how we got started. And we speak nationally, and we do trainings, we do coffees, we just go anywhere that God opens the door for us to be able to enter in and to share what He's put on, given to us. And it's really an important battle. So we are really fighting for that next generation of children, which in the end is our country, right? And also the freedom to worship our God.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys are doing amazing work. So, as I kind of already said, my podcast is dedicated to exploring the meaning of education, a
Mm-hmm.
Christian education, and why Christians should have an explicitly and unapologetically Christian philosophy of education.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I decided that this was the fight I wanted to enter is because I realized that a lot of Christians do not fully understand what's actually going on out
Mm-hmm.
there in the education world. Uh, it's not that I don't think that Christian children cannot survive the public education,
Mm-hmm.
just that I believe that the public education has left Christians.
Yes.
There's a gentleman, I think his name is Aaron Rand, who coined the term a negative world. He has three different worlds. He has a positive world, a neutral world, and a negative world. It's in a book that he wrote, which I haven't read, but I've heard him talk about this idea that Christians are living in a post-Christian world. The world is not just uh, ignoring Christian; it's actually actively
Mm-hmm.
anti-Christian. But I'm saying that to also point out that we need Christians active in the world. I don't want to preach a message that says that Christians have to abandon the
Mhm.
world, because we're also called to love our neighbor.
Mhm.
Um, so, truth in education, you said you guys work with parents, you guys also work with legislators, correct?
Yes, yes. And we work with churches. We've
Okay,
begun to work with churches to educate them on what's happening in the school and why it's so important that they step into the battle and open their doors to homeschoolers, to start a school, really to take our place back, right?
yeah,
It's God gave us that responsibility to raise our children and to be shepherds. So, we need to educate, because really what's happening right now is education's been weaponized against our families, against our freedom, against our faith. And so we
yes,
need to bring education back to the forefront of people's minds, and especially the church, as the solution for restoring everything, our freedom, our liberty. And ultimately, again, one of our biggest concerns is the more liberty and freedom we lose. And you just mentioned it, John. This is a spiritual warfare. So
yes.
it really is anti-God. Yes.
Yeah, I actually just interviewed Stephen McDowell, is it?
Yes. Yes.
Um, the one I saw you were part of that documentary about education for liberty,
Yes. Yeah.
education for liberty. I thought that was a great. I can't wait to see the finished product. I was talking to him, and such a knowledgeable man, and a passionate man for the kingdom of God. Um, so thank you for doing that. I can't wait to watch it, like I said. Um, so you said you guys educate parents.
Yes.
What do you think it's crucial that parents should understand and recognize the secular worldview that is being taught to their children?
John, I think that's the most important thing they should recognize. You know, we all send our children to school to learn academics. But unfortunately, it's not just the public schools, it's many of our Christian schools and our private schools now that are teaching a secular worldview. In
Yeah.
fact, there's something in our schools called social emotional learning, and it is the tool that's being used to bring all of this in. It's the delivery system, and it actually has an occult backing. And so we are teaching through meditation, through mindfulness. When we meditate on God's word. We clear
Yes.
our mind, and we're in prayer, and we're in scripture. But that's not what they're teaching our children. We actually have meditation rooms in our schools, and they are teaching our children how to meditate. In fact, I had a 4-year-old teach me how to meditate. So I've actually been in some trainings with some groups that have been training us. And of course, I'm not really part of that group, on all the different meditations. And I'm doing these things to be able to come back and share with parents and say, this is real. You need to be concerned. If you're a Christian parent, or whatever your faith is being eroded through these classrooms every day. And social emotional learning is what they're using to do it with. And so it sounds so good, doesn't it? Social
Yes.
emotional learning. But we know it's the opposite. So it's actually what's being used to bring in the activism, um, to destabilize our children, their beliefs, their values. It's actually designed to separate the child from the parent, and to teach, and the teachers are to become their trusted advisor. Well, that erodes that parental authority, but it also erodes the authority with that adult in the classroom, because now they've become friends, which is what they're encouraging them to do. So it's really, we have a psychologist on our board, and he said he's seen things, he's seen things with his patients that he honestly believes that SEL, social emotional learning, is so dangerous, you should pull your children and homeschool them. So when a psychologist says that, because he's seeing the outcome of what's happening, he basically said every day our children are experiencing trauma. He said, when your second grader goes to school and someone in their classroom decides to be a girl instead of a boy, that is a hit of trauma. And when a boy goes into the girl's bathroom, it's another hit of trauma. And he said all day long, they're experiencing this trauma. And that's why anxiety is out the roof with our children. But he said they can't manage that long term. So he's beginning to see more children that cut. He said used to every 3 to 4 months, every week now. Children that are coming in with PTSD, something that looks like a personality disorder. I mean, it's just, he is seeing the effects of what we're doing in our schools with our children. So that's demonic, really.
Yeah. So can you, let's go back. What is exactly is social and emotional learning? I know sometimes, or at least back in the day, parents, this used to be something that you can opt children out of.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it, and how should parents be thinking about it?
So you can opt your child out of certain parts of it. It is actually was when it was created. The gentleman that was involved in doing that, Daniel Coleman, and a Rockefeller granddaughter, his mentor was Mr. Fetzer of the Fetzer Institute.
Right.
Mr. Fetzer's mentor was Alice Bailey. Do you recall who Alice Bailey is? She actually
created a Satanist. Was he?
Yes, she was a Satanist. She created the Luciferian Publishing Company. So this has an occult backing to it, and so it's really doing what it was designed to do. It's really psychological warfare on our children. So it's being used to supposedly come in and use it to help them more academically by teaching them how to build skills, awareness, build relationships. But really, it's doing the opposite, because part of what they do every morning is they have a wellness circle.
Yes.
And you can opt out of that. But now this wellness circle, they talk about their feelings, but what they're doing, John, is they're not helping them out of their feelings. It's all self-reporting. So when you're self-reporting all day long, you are focused on yourself, and you never get out of that. So they're causing these children, really, I believe, through that and other things, the depression is on the rise, loneliness is on the rise, all this. And then they begin, through social emotional learning, they are taught to find their identity. It doesn't matter what identity is. It's not identity in Christ, but it could be a furry. Do you know what a furry is?
Yes.
Okay. So
but can you explain what it is for people that might not know?
I will. A furry is someone that identifies as an animal. Now, I will say there are probably some children that it's just a fad, but I actually interviewed 2 7th graders. And those 7th graders said something, and I thought of furry. So they let me interview them. I just did their voice. I didn't interview them with their faces or anything, but I asked them some questions. I said, do you have furries at your school? And they said, yes. I said, tell me about it. He said, we cannot wear a hat, but they can dress in their ears and their tails. They have a student that actually their friend pulls them around. He has a leash, a collar, and they're pulling them around. He said they are very disruptive and they never get in trouble. But they do, of course, if they say a word. But you could watch these 2 young 7th graders just really go from being funny to being burdened. And I asked them if it affected their work, and they said yes. So what this is doing is causing, that's trauma, right? That is trauma to those young boys. But it's also trauma to those children that are thinking their identity as an animal, because, and we have to wonder with comprehensive sex ed in our schools, does this lead to bestiality? So I think that's a question we need to ask, because there is a parent in South Georgia that a friend of mine asked, that works with us, asked, do you know what a furry is? And he said, no. And his daughter popped up and said, oh, some of them are sexual and some of them are not. So I also have a friend that teaches nursing, and they had to turn down a college student because her only requirement was that she identified as an adult cat and she needed a litter box. They literally had to turn her down. And of course, that caused them to be able to think, oh my gosh, we need to get our thoughts together on this. What's going to happen? So this is real. I believe, a lot, not all, but a lot of the mental health issues are coming from our schools. We are creating them. So, and it's unfortunate that this is happening to our children. It's actually very, very sad. So yes, a furry, they're real. And a high schooler told my husband, you don't have to worry about the furries so much, but you need to be very careful with the anime characters. So we also have anime characters in our schools. So where is the math? Where is the science? Where is the English? We're not focused on academics anymore. We've become a mental health is taking over the academics. So it's kind of where we are with that. And if you decide, they also encourage, if you decide you want to change your gender, it doesn't matter. They're going to affirm you in whatever you decide you want to be.
Yeah, and obviously when you talked about bestiality, the thought that came to mind was the passage over there in Leviticus, where God, after warning about homosexuality, he also warns about bestiality. So that seems to me it's a natural kind of outcome in Romans 1, when people defy God, they go down a path that leads directly into those kind of things.
Yes.
So this is where our society finds itself, where we're now starting to cross these lines. It's out of control. This is basically the direct result of secular humanism. When humans decide that they are God, this is what happens, because that's too much to bear for humans. Now, you know, I have the CASEL website here pulled up, and it says that, it says that social and emotional learning, SEL, is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities.
There you go. That's what we just talked about, right?
Yeah, manage emotions and achieve personal and collective goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationship, and make responsible and caring decisions. And then at the bottom, it says, the most effective way to promote SEL is to infuse social and emotional learning into every part of students' daily lives across all their classrooms during all the times of school day and when they are in their homes and communities.
John, it is in every subject. You cannot opt out of it. That was the entire goal. And let me tell you what, it's in our churches. SEL is coming into our churches. And also, it's so stealth and it sounds so good that I was talking to a new parent and they were excited about the parenting podcast they were listening to. And I started listening, went, oh my goodness, that I didn't say anything, but I went and did my research, and it's SEL. It's SEL, it's social emotional learning. Every one of our counselors, the younger counselors, have been trained in social emotional learning. And so we can't seem to get away from it, because really it's to saturate everyone's lives. So empathy is an interesting word, because empathy is not compassion. They're two different things.
Right.
And empathy, they're teaching these young children that they should be able to step into their friend's shoes, literally, which is teaching tolerance, right?
Yes.
So they don't, compassion is having compassion for someone. You care about them, you reach down, you want to help them, you want to pull them up. Compassion is one thing. Empathy is literally taking on their burden, and it teaches tolerance. You can't carry someone else's burden. Like you can't even ask for forgiveness for someone else's sin or whatever it is that's happening. But it's very different than compassion. And I think I don't use empathy. I use compassion because I think it's been weaponized against us. So compassion is very important, but empathy is actually being used to teach tolerance. And it's being used at a very young age. So it's really overwhelming. You cannot, again, and this is an example of how they bring in, through social emotional learning, critical race theory and diversity and equity inclusion, because an example might be that a history teacher is talking about, race or slavery, and then the next teacher confirms it through a math problem or whatever it is. So that diversity, equity, inclusion has come in. So there's a lot of shaming that goes on through all of this also, for all of us. All the children. It's not just white, it's black and brown, because there's a desire through this to divide. And so they're actually using SEL again. It can cause hate. So we have a lot of loneliness and a lot of division and a lot of hatred. And we're seeing that through the bullying and the violence that's beginning to go on in our schools. But you cannot discipline them because we have restorative justice. So you can't discipline them. And so really, God created all of us to have boundaries. These children need boundaries. They don't know who they are or where they fit in, or they're just out there. And, when we give children boundaries, they feel secure and they know they're loved and they know they're in a good spot. But we're not doing that. We're removing all the boundaries. So.
Well, I don't think we're removing. I think we've removed the boundaries already. In fact, for decades now.
That's true.
And so it's the things like SEL and things like SEL, by the way, these things are inevitable in my view, because again, we've removed God as in the Bible as our standard, and the Judeo-Christian base, I guess, that established this country. So we've replaced it with a counterfeit, which is secular humanism.
We have.
And so secular humanism is going to try and find all kinds of counterfeits that are devoid of any any like solid rock foundation. It's all up in the air. So if you really think about the whole social and emotional, everything that they just said in their definition, and these are like the go-to people for social and emotional learning.
Right.
All these things are things that a Christian parent, after sending their children to the school, and the school decided that it's their job at the school to teach the kid how to have empathy, because as you already established, empathy for us Christians is different from empathy at the school. In fact, for me, I think kids up until they're like maybe 14, 15, if that, do not really have the ability to really have empathy. They're still being discipled into what it means to have to try to put themselves in someone's shoes. And
Right.
also, because we as humans should try to uh, relate to other people, we cannot relate to everything. I can't put myself in a shoe of someone that's a fairy.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't even think that's right.
I know. I know.
Yeah,
So it is tough. Yes.
yeah, I can feel sorry for you that you're going through this, but then the school automatically will categorize me as a bigot because I should be
Mhm.
accepting that person as they are. Well, I don't even think you should be living that lifestyle. So that automatically undermines a child who's coming from a Christian home, who's being told that this is how God created the world, this is what God allows, and then they're going to the school and someone is telling them, well, actually, you have to either accept this or you're gonna be marginalized. This is why I would argue that Christians have to rip their kids out of these public
I
schools.
I agree. And Daniel Coleman um, wrote taught a course at Harvard on psychology and consciousness. Everything we're dealing with goes back to social psychology, every bit of
Yes.
it. So we have been psychology is really what we're dealing with, but this is a new age movement, really, and it focuses on Buddhism and all these different new age religions. And of course, we know in the end, it really is what they're really doing is they're teaching the new Green Deal in our schools. They're using SEL for that. They're teaching climate change, which is causing guilt with these children. They're teaching that private property is bad. They they're teaching everything that we know is really just not true. So, but our children are getting fearful for our earth and for the fact that the climate change is going to kill us all. So, this is what they're teaching in our schools. And so, the movement, though, is if you look at all that, it's environmental religion.
Yeah.
So, in the end, the goal is to worship the earth. And so we have a lot that's going on within our schools with these children. So, yes, SEL, I believe, is the Trojan horse. So, let me give you an example. I'm going to read this. It's a paper we have, but this is how I'm going to give you this is a long paper, but a couple examples of how God looks at things and how SEL is interpreted. I should have pulled this up. I didn't realize I was going to do it. So, SEL wording is developing a sense of purpose. SEL worldview behind SEL wording is Buddhist, secular, and New Age. So, they would respond finding purpose within yourself. Biblical worldview is to glorify God in life or death. Philippians 1:20, you shall love your God and your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:34. So you can see the difference in we're worshiping self or not worshiping God through SEL, and that's really what's being taught. So another one quick example, which I just hit the wrong button, but is well, we might skip that because I was doing this for my phone and I actually lost track there. But we can see what this is doing. It's manipulating our children, and it's really Satan is after everything God created, and the family
Yeah.
is huge. And you destroy the children, and you're destroyed the family. So that's the main goal for what's happening. Of course, there's so many other things going on, but the biggest thing to me right now is the spiritual side of it. That it's connected to Buddhism. It's connected to the Dalai Lama. This is a really big deal, and this is where our churches need to wake up and realize.
Yes. So I was gonna ask you a question on the website, Truth, your website, Truth in Education.
Mm-hmm.
You said that one of the ways that you educate uh, parents and churches
Mm-hmm.
is that you discuss how mindfulness transcendental meditation is being used to expose our children to universalism, Hinduism, Buddhism, New Age, and humanism.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about transcendental meditation and how it's being used through, I would suppose, social and emotional learning, or is that another different avenue?
No, they work together, actually, John.
Yeah.
So, what we believe is that meditation, we actually, again, have those rooms in our schools where children are encouraged to go meditate. What we believe is they are meditating to clear their minds, and then social emotional learning is being used to indoctrinate them
Mm,
with these religions and with the divisiveness. So that is how it's working. They work together. They work together. So yes, it's a very it's just hard to believe that our children are going into school every day and they're being, we have a First Amendment issue and nobody knows it. So that's what we're doing. So there are different meditations they're being taught. They're being taught, of course, empathy and all everything surrounding, um, the awareness, the relationships, the caring. It's all sounds wonderful, and it is all wonderful,
yeah.
unless it's twisted, and it has been, uh, to bring about a totally different worldview. So the United Nations, I have a video that literally says social emotional learning is our pathway to global citizenship. So, if we're going to have a global citizenship, they've got to be collective, right? It's collectivism. They've got to
Yes.
all think the same, believe the same, and care about the same thing. And so that's where we're headed. Is they're using this to their end goal, and that's to create global citizens. And through that, uh, it's it's Marxism. It's communist. Marxist was a Satanist. So and that's what's in our schools. So there is an end goal, and it's a UN goal. All this comes from the United Nations, actually. So, and it is to create a one world, global world. And they're doing it by manipulating them spiritually and separating relationships, anything they can do that they can end up controlling the child. That's really what it's about too, is to break them down and destabilize them so they can control them. And the sad part about that is you're getting rid of individualism. You're getting rid of any motivation. That's why we see all these children at school with their earpods in and looking at their iPad that aren't even engaged in school. I just
Right.
heard another story about that today, because they have nothing. They don't have any hope, they feel like, because that's being taken away from them.
You're right, because they're being given an empty religion.
Yes.
The fact, and this is one thing that drives me insane, is that there's a lot of people out there, including a lot of well-meaning Christians, who
Mm-hmm.
think that education can be neutral, that you can somehow teach anything from a
Mm-hmm.
neutral perspective. I mean, that's a lie. That's
It
the
is.
biggest lie that was ever sold to the church,
Mm-hmm.
especially here in America, is that secularism or a secular public square is a neutral public square where we can all meet together from different worldviews and backgrounds and be able to do business together from a neutral perspective.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And sure, me and a Muslim might be able to come together and exchange goods in a business way,
Mm-hmm.
and both go home to our homes, um, you know, fine.
Right.
But if there's going to be someone to regulate the public square, that person is going to have to come from a specific worldview. You
Yes.
just simply cannot have a neutral public square. The same with an education. The
Hmm.
education system, curriculums, and the environment, it cannot be neutral. It's just an impossibility because humans
Yes.
are naturally religious. We're religious by nature. We have to put something at the center. And so the education system, I was listening to a lady named Candy Gunther. Have you ever heard of her?
I have,
Candy Gunther Brown.
I have
Huh?
not.
Yes, so she wrote a book. I forgot the name of the book. But I think she's a lawyer. I think she has a law background.
Okay.
She's also a Christian, so she discusses a lot about yoga and mindfulness in public schools.
Yes.
And her whole basically point in this is that when they bring yoga and mindfulness in public school, they're violating uh, the First Amendment in the
Yes.
sense that if the people on the other side say that you cannot bring religion
Hmm.
to the public square, if we all agree that that's what should be, even though I just said it's impossible,
Yes.
then they are tricking us by removing Christianity and bringing in Hinduism
Hmm.
through yoga and mindfulness,
Yes.
and basically replacing one religion for another. So her whole position is if that's what we're doing, if we're agreeing that religion should not be in the public school, there should not be one enforced religion, one
Hmm.
sanctioned religion, then yoga and mindfulness should also be thrown out of the public schools.
I agree. And that, SEL was created by man and it's an atheist worldview. And you're absolutely right. That's what they're using it for. It's a new age thought, it's Buddhism. Um, and that is exactly what they're doing, trying to build a utopian society.
Yeah.
And that's the next thing of concern I think that we should have is we are trying to pass bills in our states and it's going across the country to bring chaplains into our schools. Well, in our research, these chaplains are tied into the United Nations. And of course, we know it's interfaith, right?
Right.
So, knowing how this is all coming together and we're watching it unfold, is SEL just uh, laying the fertile ground for these chaplains to come in and begin to bring in the interfaith movement into our schools, which we already have, really, in a way, right? Because we're bringing in all of these different religions. So are they just going to come in and just reinforce all that? I think it's a dangerous spot for us to be. And it's really being pushed in every state. So I think people should really pray about that, do their homework. And if they agree with me or don't agree with me, I don't know. But I'm certainly in touch with our legislators, and it is a bill that we have a bill at our Capitol. Texas
Yeah.
has already passed it. So it's another layer, they're saying, of counseling for these students. We don't need another layer of counseling. And uh, so there's a lot of red flags there and a lot of dangers. So this to me is building the Tower of Babel right within our schools,
Yeah.
because we are bringing in all these religions that have nothing to do with our biblical God. And as you said, if we can't teach a religion in school, but I agree with you, you can't be neutral. We were created to worship. We're going to worship something.
Yeah.
So there is no neutrality. Um, and I think, unlike you, Christians really need to rise up and say, hey, God gave me this responsibility to raise my child. I should be walking and talking with him all day long. Or let me tell you what, though, John, I sat in on a symposium probably a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years. Time's going so quickly. But it was at a Christian school, and it was for headmasters of Christian schools from all over the country. And it was 2 days of diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory, all the books, and most of those headmasters took it in and they wrapped it in scripture. In fact, the very last session of that symposium, one of the headmasters asked, he said, my parents believe that diversity, equity, and inclusion are secular. How do I wrap that in scripture? So we cannot even trust our private schools because most of them, and I'm just going to tell you, a red flag for any parent is, if they're in a Christian school, if they bring social emotional learning in, you are on your way to becoming a public school. Because once that comes in, then all the invasive surveys come in, and none of those surveys that they give our children are positive questions. They take surveys that ask questions that would make someone think they have mental health issues. Are your parents divorced? Do you do drugs? How often do you have sex? Are you liked at school? Do you have peer pressure? Do you like your teacher? Are you struggling in school? Nothing positive is ever asked these children. And we have to remember all that data is being stored. That's personal data. And they also ask about the parents. So it's collecting data on everyone, not just the student. It's on the entire family. And they take these surveys every week. And the state, each state, Georgia gives it twice a year, their own survey. And it's, have you ever thought of committing suicide? Again, it has nothing to do with academics. It's all behavioral, all mental health, and it's all negative. So we actually, a board member in a county in Georgia, we passed a mental health bill, John, in 2022, HB 1013, that was the framework for the next 10 years of mental health bills that will be passed in this state. And one of the things that they made legal is to give universal screenings for mental health, okay, starting in infancy. So why would you do that? I would say it's probably they're going to begin to bring a social worker into every home, is our opinion, and kind of what we heard at another event. And they're going to start monitoring how are you raising your child? Are you harming their self-esteem? It's all going to be based on that. But universal screenings means they do not have to have permission to screen your child. If it was an individual screening, they would have to have your permission, but not with a universal screening. So now with these school-based health clinics coming into our schools, they're going to be doing universal screening on dyslexia, universal screening on ADHD. And remember, with every, their goal is to label every child with something because it brings money. But that label is actually a diagnosis. And those labels don't go away. So parents need to also, kind of got off on a different track here, but be careful now that school is starting, because in their child's handbook, there should be a consent form for medical. They need to take that consent form. If you sign that consent form, it is a consent form for anything medical. So we always encourage parents to, actually, we have a medical opt-out form that it will be on our site next week, and they can go and download it. And if they want it, they can email it to me prior to that. But literally, I would go into that form and I would write on there, I do not consent to anything other than a minor, something that's needed immediately, like from a fall or something like that. That you have my permission that if you cannot get in touch with me in time and my child needs immediate help, then I consent to that, but nothing else. So if people want this medical consent form, they can email me at rhonda@truthandeducation.org. It is very, very important to know that these health clinics are completely staffed with, it's like you're taking your child to a walk-in clinic. And we're going to lose a lot of parental rights through that. So, yes. Wow, I got way off on something else. Sorry. One thing leads to the other, because SEL causes the issues, right? Now we've got to refer them to the clinic. for mental health therapy, for psychiatrists, for psychologists. They're all going to be in there, and telehealth. So it all is one big snare, and one thing feeds the other. So those surveys prove that they need more money for SEL because things are getting worse. So that's why they don't ask good questions like, do you like school? Do you have friends? Who are your friends at school? So, yeah. So there's a lot of red flags that parents need to wake up and really, really pay attention to what's happening in their schools.
So, I have you ever heard of a lady named Laura Lynn Hughes?
You are giving me some names tonight that I have not, that I'm going to search them out. No.
Yeah, she wrote a book, Choosing Zoe. She's a pro-life advocate.
Yeah.
Choose Zoe. She got pregnant at 15, and despite being pressured to abort the child, she decided to keep the child. And anyway, so she recently sent an like a newsletter email, basically calling parents to be vigilant because so they can protect their children from online predators as they head back to school. So she is basically saying that through social media, messaging apps, gaming devices, and all this, that the predators are not only there, but they are being groomed to be susceptible to the being preyed on.
Yes.
Based on what you're saying, what the reason I remember that email is because it sounds to me like SEL is actually creating a direct clientele to these online predators that are also ready to prey on people's children.
So Planned Parenthood actually did a slideshow connecting how they use social emotional learning to bring in all their model. So yes, it's all tied together. We are grooming our children for sex predators and for pedophilia. And we're doing it through the pornography in our schools and through comprehensive sexuality education. You know, it used to be comprehensive sex ed, but they've changed sex to sexuality because that is inclusive of gender. Yeah. So yes, they are grooming our children for that. And let me share one other thing. The grants that are available for these school-based health clinics. In Georgia, 2 of the grants that we have just taken require gender dysphoria screening and the morning after pill. Let that sink in. And now we have school-based health clinics, and we have counselors that if a child at 13 in Georgia, and this is different in every state, but everyone should look at their state. Yeah. In Georgia at 13, you can make your own outpatient care only outpatient for mental health therapy and drug addiction. But in some states, it's outpatient and inpatient. So what's going to happen when my child, it could even be earlier, but especially at 13, goes to their counselor, whom I'm going to tell you are all trained in social emotional learning, they're woke, and tells them that they want to start hormones and puberty blockers, and they're scared to tell their parents. Well, that's a behavioral issue, right? So now they can just move them right into under mental health and behavioral issues, and they're not going to tell the parents. So now we have grants that they can literally give them the morning after pill, or send them out or give them hormones and puberty blocking drugs. These clinics are sold, and that sounds wonderful. The parent doesn't have to leave. Everything's right there. It's very convenient. And unfortunately, we're giving up our parental rights. And these are on the campus are close to the campus or near the campus, but they're not controlled by the state or the school. They're third parties. So we know that stakeholders are involved in those, right? So public-private partnerships, that means that the private corporations have joined with the public, which is our government. Money is to be made. So what's going to happen when these drugs are beginning to be prescribed? Are they going to overprescribe them because now there's a funnel for money? Are we going to overdiagnose and misdiagnose so that these corporations are going to make more money off our children? Our children have become human capital is really what it comes down to. So all of this data that they are collecting, so if they do a universal screening on dyslexia, that's a brain issue. Who's going to buy that data? Where's that data going to go? So where is all our children's data going? I know in Georgia, they passed a bill that it can be shared among all the government agencies. And what's going to happen if a third party gets a hold of it? So we have a lot of serious issues and things to think about as parents. We always encourage a parent, never, ever use a school counselor. Opt out of any school counseling, opt out of the circles, opt out of all surveys, and you can opt out of all of that. You can opt out of sex ed, sexuality education. So we have all those opt-out forms if they want them. And we also recommend that if you can afford it, to have an attorney send it in for you, because I have had parents tell me that they've opted their children out of this stuff. And then the teacher will come in and say, hey, if you all do this survey, I'll give you a pizza party, because it hurts their climate rating, the school's climate rating. So they get less money. So the sad part is it's all about money. It's not about our children. It's not about our children. So, yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, well, the schools, the public schools specifically, and unfortunately, this is also the wokeness is spreading into the private schools.
It is
for the same reasons. It's all about money. A lot of this money is tied up to the car sale, and all these other entities will tie some government funds that people will be applying for. They'll tie their programs to it, and they'll find some Christian that will try to Christianize it to make it acceptable in a school environment. So unfortunately, because Christians, in my view, are not really paying attention to this kind of stuff, the enemy has been able to really have a field day with this area. I have a question, a few more questions, and then we'll wrap up here. But what do you know about the idea of a community school?
Whole community, whole child. That is the main focus. This all comes out of the CDC. It's all tied together. You can find CASEL, and I would encourage your listeners to go to casel.org, CASEL.org. That is the main framework for social emotional learning. But there are many programs underneath that, but they all have to align with CASEL in order to be in the public, any school. So there are a lot of different names like Second Step. So, but oh gosh, John, what'd you just ask me?
The community school.
Okay, the community schools. That is the ultimate goal. That whole community, whole child means we will encompass the entire community. That school-based health clinic in that school is the hub for the entire family and the entire community. We're already seeing that in certain cities and towns. So everyone's needs will be met in that community. Your child, think of the castle wheel. The child is in the middle, right?
Yes.
And then they're surrounded by these five, a castle um,
Framework.
thank you. I just
Framework.
lost it. Framework.
Yeah.
And then outside of that is the community. Then outside of that is every government agency. So what are we doing? We're seeing it come together. The whole childhood community is really a communist model. We feed
Yes.
the children, we clothe the children, we give them their medical, we give them their mental health, we give them their vaccines, we teach them. We even have housing. Many of our mental health bills now include housing. So we are consuming the family, and that is what the whole childhood community is. You can find that model in China. This is the ultimate goal, is the control of the child, the family, and all the needs will be met right there. There's also something called One Health. We can have another call and get into that because that's too deep to get into right now. But
Yeah.
an intersectionality and all of that. So, but yes, that is where we're headed. Total government dependency, total loss of parental rights. And that's where we're headed. And everything will be based, really, we're building a mental digital prison is really kind of what we're doing, right? Because you don't hear academics ever. So now mental health has moved under behavioral health. Behavior covers everything. There's not one thing that doesn't fall under that. So it's a really big picture, and there's so millions of dollars that are being poured into this, and tons of non-governmental organizations and public-private partnerships all pushing this. And I'm not sure if you okay. I'd love to give my view on school choice, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
So charter schools and school choice. School choice was designed. I used to teach classes long ago on Agenda 21.
Yeah.
School choice has been around and being pushed forever. It's straight from the United Nations. The real end goal is to bring homeschooling and private schools into the fold of public school, and we are going to privatize our education. That means no local control, no parental input. Everything that will be taught will be one curriculum, no matter federalized, right? Uh, and that's what's happened to Sweden. In fact, Alex Newman shares about that. That once that voucher system came in, everything went away. I mean, it became a government run school and it was privatized. So all of our the majority of our charter schools are run by management organizations. They make money. They're a public private partnership. So these charter schools actually play a role in school choice because the goal is to make money off of these schools and to privatize it. So we are going to lose total control of our schools over time as school choice moves forward. And you can say you're going to change schools, but where are you going to go? You just said it earlier, John. Between the federal money, the state money, and the grants, there's not a school that's any different than any other school. They're all the same. So where are you going to really go? And then you have your private schools, but what's happening, and we're seeing, and history has shown that if private schools take the money, they usually raise their tuition. But not only that, I think that's part of why our private schools are changing, is because they have taken government money. They took COVID money, and some of them take Title I money. So now they have to follow these mandates. So I think the freest we can be is for parents to never touch that money. Look at Arizona. If you're a homeschooler and you can opt into their school choice, you're no longer a homeschooler. You have to pull your homeschooling certificate. You are now an ESA student, which means you're a public school student, right? And now they're tracking you, which they never tracked homeschoolers before. Now they're tracking what you buy and your data. And so the goal is to bring us all into one thing, one umbrella, and privatize it and make money off of it. So, goodness, there's so much. Such a battle out there. But
I want to say something to that too, is that,
yeah.
because there could be someone out there who might be thinking, well, I will do what I have to do for my family. That, you
Mhm.
know, you do what you want to do with your family. What they might not understand is that if some homeschoolers and Christians support, and Christian schools take this
Mhm.
money from the government,
Yeah.
eventually the government is going to start changing laws that will
Yes.
impact the entire homeschooling community, not just the people taking the money. They're
Mhm.
going to start putting the screws on the homeschooling community as a whole, to have to teach this, to have to not teach that. You're not going to be required to teach that, if you
Mhm.
want to be in
Mhm.
compliance with the state. And so it might not sound in the short term like it's going to affect anyone else, but it's
Yes.
actually a move, a selfish move, in my view, that is going to ultimately impact the whole homeschooling and other alternative education communities that are trying to
Mhm.
just trust God and disciple their own children within the confines of a Christian education. So, because a lot of times when you hear this kind of thing, you also hear people who say, well, I'm going to do this for my family. That should be okay because I'm not telling you what to do with your family. But this is
Mm.
actually something that will affect all of us in the long run.
You are right. And you know what? Satan is not, I mean, Satan makes everything beautiful until you can't get out of it, right?
Yeah.
And God is not a God of quick fixes. It took us years to get to where we are. And I believe that people are beginning to say, well, let's just take it until they start changing.
Yeah.
Well, it will be too late because their goal is to open as many private and Christian schools as they can, get this money in those schools, and those schools can't give it up. They're
Yeah.
not going to fire their teachers. They're not going to do all this stuff. So they have them. They have them. They can't do without the money. And you're right. Slowly but surely, they will take away the right to homeschool. In fact, Arizona's governor is already wanting more accountability and more transparency because guess what? Let's be honest, it's kind of a welfare program
Yes. Yes, it
because
is.
it's universal school choice, like universal health care. It's the same thing. It's a welfare program. So people are buying things with the money and going out and selling them. So now they have a lot of fraud within the system. So it's not our money. That's what I don't understand. If it goes to the state, it's the state's money. If we take it, we're taking the state's money, and eventually there will be ties. And so I think that we're desperate, and I understand that because people like me are talking about these things in the schools, and parents want to do the right thing for their kids because they love them. But, and I don't know what that looks like for every family, but I know there are a lot of families that I see and that could really sacrifice and pull their children out of schools. But that is personal. It's a decision they have to make. What do we do to help the parents that can't? I want to say that grandparents need to be more active. We need to come alongside our children and our grandchildren and those of us that can, and we need to help them because this is huge. This is important. Do we need to help them homeschool? Do we need to help them care for them a few hours a day? Whatever we need to do, we need to pull our families back together. And I think Satan's done a great job of separating us all and telling us, "Oh, I'm retired. I don't need to do anything anymore. I did that for my children. They can do it for theirs." We
Yeah.
need to come back together as a family. And when we can, and it's not always possible, we need to be there for our grandchildren. That's all we leave behind. We don't leave anything else behind. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, Miss Rhonda, we need a revival for that to
we
happen,
do. We
because
do, don't we?
yes, we do, because the public school has taught many of these
Mhm.
people, many,
Yeah,
including
that's true.
myself. I went to public school, but we're talking about decades that this
Mhm.
is the new culture. People don't see it, but I talk to a lot of young people today, and I'm almost 40, but I'm talking about people that are in their 20s that are thinking about getting married and start
Mhm.
families, who are already planning their lives around sending their children to public school because they feel they have to in order to do whatever they believe they have to do. They went to school, they have master's degree, they have to go and pursue a career, and therefore we have to submit the children for those 8 hours in order for us to
Mhm.
do this. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is what all of us have been conditioned to do. No
It is.
one is looking to sacrifice. And so imagine a grandparent who
Mhm.
have worked their whole life, they've made their kids are in college, their kids are starting their own family. It's time for me to relax. This is what I worked for my whole life, to relax. No grandkids. I only get grandkids when I need to spend time with them, but no real like commitment to them of what you're saying. So it's going to take an entire paradigm shift that I
Mhm.
think requires a great awakening in this country and around the world. I have a question for you though before we go here. Um, you were talking about social and emotional learning and the pornography in the schools and all these things that really just makes the public schools very dangerous, and some of these Christian schools very dangerous for
Mhm.
children, and at the very least not a good environment for children that are coming from a Christian household, especially all children ultimately, but especially children that are coming from Christian household because they're being taught something else in
Mhm.
in their churches, in their Sunday schools. This question I always ask a lot of my guests: how come I don't hear a lot of pastors talking about this stuff? A lot of pastors and people in leadership. Uh, why do you think, in your view, we're not hearing a lot of this discussed at the church house?
I think our churches have infiltrated also, right? There was a theologian in the late 1800s that said the way to get socialism into America is through their churches. So
Mm,
we're seeing our theology schools are not as strong as they used to be. We see younger ministers coming out and totally, God is love, right? There's nothing else.
yeah,
He's just love. And I think some of them, I think Satan uses the 501c3. And even though I have one, they use it. He's used it against our churches, I believe, because a lot of pastors don't understand their rights. So they're fearful to step outside the bound and understand what they can do and what they can't do. Then others, I believe, use it for an excuse because either they're fearful
yeah,
or they don't want to lose members. So I think our churches, we started seeker friendly churches, didn't we? And
yes,
we did not mature the Christians. We did a child left behind kind of thing in our churches, didn't we?
yeah,
So we dumbed it down for the people coming in, and we didn't mature our Christians. So that's part of what's wrong with our church, also, I believe. And um, but God calls us to mature Christians, and we go out, right? And we witness and we bring them in, but we're supposed to be matured to be able to do that. And we haven't done that. There's also a gentleman named Peter Drucker. Are you familiar with him?
sounds
He
familiar.
was not a Christian, but he is a management guru. He's not with us. He's passed away, but he still has classes, management courses in colleges. But he mentored some pastors like Rick Warren and Bill Hybel.
Okay,
And that is when our churches started to become more businesses, many of them, not all of them. And your pastor almost came more of a CEO than a pastor. I've seen that. I don't know if you have or not,
yes,
but
ma'am.
I remember at that time I looked on Rick Warren's website, and it was full of globalist books. And he was part of Council on Foreign Relations. So, a lot of things, the world has come into our churches, just as God tells us in Revelation that false prophets are going to come out from among us, and we're beginning to see that. So, John, we're not going to reach everybody. God, we're not doing anything, but God's using us, right? But I think he's just separating. And I believe many parents are listening because there's a quiet move and they're pulling their children to homeschool them. It is growing.
Yes.
But my heart is to protect that from the school choice bills that are coming. That is our last freedom, to be the parent, to teach them and to teach them about our faith. But I think that a lot of the pastors really don't have a clue of what's going on in the schools. If the parents don't, and they're dropping their children off every day, then a lot of the pastors don't. So we're beginning to see more speak up, but as a whole, I don't think they're really aware of how deep things are. We can see the books, we can see certain things, but yeah, I can't not know about the books. So yes, I don't know the answer to that. I think it's fear, a lot of it. And it's pretty, it's one thing to go out and be pro-life and stand in front of an abortion clinic, and we need to do that. It's different when you come against the LGBTQ community, isn't it? Because they are going to come after you. And so I think it causes a lot of fear, just thinking of getting into that culture war. But the unfortunate part is it's now at their doors. They have these individuals coming into their churches, and what are they going to do? Hopefully they're there to repent and to be restored. But we're seeing churches that it's really just the opposite. They're loving them, and unfortunately they're not loving them into eternity.
Right.
So, and it's going to cause filtering down to their young children. So I don't know the answer. I think it's what you said, it's a revival. But when we train and we share and we speak, if we have one person pull their child or stop and think about getting involved and understanding what's happening in their school, even if they can't pull their child, to us, that's a win. We're not going to change everybody's heart. That's God. And it is a heart change. That's what it comes down to. It really is a heart change. And we can't pass legislation. Let me share one more thing with you. I attended an American School Counseling Association conference here in Atlanta. There were 5,000 counselors. And in one of the breakout sessions, they literally said, our ethical duty is above the law. If I cannot use pronouns, I'll use nicknames. If I cannot talk about gender, I'll saturate my room in it. And what does God say? Bad company corrupts, right? Right. There is not a piece of legislation that you can pass that will stop that. That is just evil. And they are radical and they believe in what they believe, just like we believe in what we believe. And you couldn't write a piece of legislation that would stop them from doing what they're doing because their ethical duties above the law. So it is a hard issue.
Yeah. And so on the one hand, for me, I'm thinking, okay, these people are activists. Like you said, they believe wholeheartedly what they believe in. It's evil, but they themselves don't realize they're being evil. They are well intentioned, but you know what they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So my big thing is I want for first and foremost pastors to take on this fight, because pastors are called to be shepherds, and shepherds are supposed to equip the people of God. And this is what it says in Ephesians 4, I believe, where the Bible says that God has given these offices to equip the saints, right? So the predicament we find ourselves in is that the saints are not being equipped. I guarantee you some of those counselors were Christian. They go to church. They're Christians. They go to church. They love Jesus, but they just have been indoctrinated to
They have.
to adapt these ideologies in the name of helping people. It's all part of critical theory, where you're
Mhm.
conditioned to see the world a certain way.
Yes.
So you guys are, uh, doing a lot of good work at Truth in Education. You guys are encouraging churches to start on-site Christian schools, which is great. I love
Mhm.
that. That's my desire, to see every church in the world open a school. I
Mhm.
want as many schools opened, as many churches planted. That's just
Yes. Yes.
that's just my kind of prayer. I
Mhm.
want, as those who don't want to send their kids to the Christian schools and hybrid schools, that they will be empowered and be resourced, well resourced, to homeschool their children, to be
Mhm.
involved on that level. Um, you guys also encourage churches to provide scholarship to assist families to get biblically based curriculum. How is all this work going? Are you guys seeing a lot of good reception from the churches? What do you have to say about that?
It is slow, but we just keep. Now I will say there is a movement. There are a lot of organizations now that are beginning to reach out to churches, so I do see some light and some things changing, so I think it will come. We just worked with a really large church in Atlanta, a wonderful church, and to bring a Christian school model. They were actually going to start a school, and then someone gave them their school, and so then I introduced them. God used me to introduce them to what's called the principal approach, and it's a Christian school model. And they are so excited. They're going to incorporate that into their school. So it's just meeting these pastors, building relationships, and then introducing them to these. And I'll just be honest, I'm going to the churches that I know are talking about the culture. Those are on my list
Yeah,
first because they understand what's happening in the schools. And I'm praying that they're going to be more open. To saying this is our responsibility. And I believe it's the church's responsibility. And that's not the preacher, that's all of us,
yeah,
right? In our churches to raise scholarship money for these children. We should be doing this. We need to get back to what God has called us to do as followers. And so it's exciting to be. It's hard, but it's exciting to be alive right now. We're here for a purpose at this time. So I also want to say something. We have a lot of good Christian, and not even just Christian, we have a lot of good teachers, but they're trapped in the
yeah,
schools. And they're not all happy. But I agree with you. We need to pray for them. I think people should put these teachers and these counselors and everyone on their prayer list because we do have good people in those schools. They just have no control and they feel stuck. So, and then I want to pray for these families because there are a lot of families that they are doing their best for their children and they love their children. And so government has not made it easy for
yeah.
families. The taxes and all the burdens they put on families has made it very, very difficult. So we just keep praying like you for a revival, John, and for them to stay, Christ is their anchor, and just to always be vigilant about what's happening in their schools
Yeah.
and to do the best they can. But to remember, we have those opt out forms. They're very important, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
So as school starts.
Yeah, I'm going to share your information
Okay.
in the website, and some of these resources listed on the truthineducation.org website. because it is my desire that people that will hear this will also be equipped to know that first, there's no need to despair. There's a lot of people working hard, Christian, loving God, Jesus loving people, working hard to make sure that if you absolutely have to send your kids to the public school, which we know there's people who have no choice, that there are things you can do, which means that you have to be actively engaged with what's going on, and be able to go out of your way to find people like you and others who have already done a lot of the homework, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I thank you for that. Uh, can you share with me and anyone that will hear this ways in which we can pray for you personally, and also for Truth in Education? Also share some of the work that you guys have, some things that are coming up for you guys that you'd like to share with us, and basically just other ways in which people can support your ministry.
Oh, thank you, John. I think to pray for my prayer for myself, and I would love prayer for, is that this never becomes about me. It's God gets the glory, and we're there to do whatever He calls us to do. And it's about the children. And then if you can pray for Truth in Education, for God to continue to open doors where He wants us to go, and that we're wise and discerning, and that we are being obedient, and just continue to make those connections. I pray that He brings more parents forward. They're not always going to want to do that, and not being anonymous, but we love to work with them, and if they're interested in learning more, because if you're in the public school, and we know it's hard for a lot of parents to make that change. We want to train you on what's in the school, because guess what? It's not to make you fearful. It's to give you conversation with your children as they age, so that you'll understand what's happening, and you can help them understand what's happening, and what to look for, and what to talk to you about. And so to pray for that, pray that parents will get engaged and learn what's really happening, so that they can then talk to their children, educate their children, and share with other parents. I think that's very, very important. And so, and what we do off the generosity of people that see the value in what we're doing. And so it's always hard to say, but we do live off of donations, and I'm sure you do too. And so it's important, because that's what allows us to continue to do what we're doing. But most important is to pray for these families, especially the ones that cannot make a change, that they will at least come forward and let us show them what to look for and how to protect their children. So pray for a revival. As you said, John, we need to pray for hearts to change. So thank you for asking.
I see that you guys have a Truth in Education Summit coming up.
Yes, we do. And that's at First Baptist Atlanta in Georgia. And we have some great speakers. We have Rebecca Friedrichs, who actually sued the National Education Association and won that case, so that teachers are not mandated to join the union. And then Alex Newman. Alex is on our advisory board, and he's going to be speaking about what we were saying earlier, the true meaning, purpose of education. And so he'll be speaking. James Lindsay was going to be with us, but he has been called to Korea to speak. So we will have a Zoom in with him. And then I'll be speaking on the spirituality side of SEL. And we have our psychologist that's on our board, and he's going to be speaking. So it's going to be a great, great day of learning and sharing and praying together and um, knowing God's working. So I'm so grateful to First Baptist for hosting us.
Amen. I'm not
So
gonna make it, but
yeah,
I'll be praying.
I'd love for you to come.
Yeah, one day, one day.
Thank you. Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes,
Well,
yes.
Miss Rhonda Thomas, thank you so much for joining me again for the Counter-Revolution. Um, this was a very enlightening conversation that we had today. I know a lot of people are going to find value in this, and I really, really appreciate you taking time to talk to me today.
Thank you for having me,
Yes, ma'am.
John.
All right. Well, I will talk to you later, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
I would love to, John. That would be
Yes.
great. Thank you so much. Now, I was going to, I wanted to donate to your mission trip and I can't find that email.
Uh,
Aren't you doing a
yes.
mission trip? Tell me where I go
I will
to donate.
resend you the email, the link. Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
That'll be
Okay.
great. That'll be great. All
Yes,
right.
ma'am.
Thank
Have
you.
a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye
All
bye.
right, folks. There you have it. Rhonda Thomas, great conversation. Um, if you stuck around this long, please consider subscribing to my channel. Leave a review to this podcast and hit the bell notification if you're watching on YouTube so you can be notified whenever I drop an episode. Besides that, I will see you on the flip side.